Georgia, a magical land. For many, a place straight out of a dream.
A place where nature has been especially generous. And the people are wonderful and hospitable, though also very spirited. What is it like today? Is it a land of cheap, delicious food and wine? Or simply a land of pothole-ridden roads, high prices and post-Soviet poverty? In this and the following films, we will try not only to visit many of Georgia's tourist attractions, but also to answer the question we asked a moment ago. Join us! First, you have to get to Georgia. By plane, of course. A road trip through Turkey? That would be quite an undertaking. It would probably take about 3 days. The first thing you notice on arrival is the stray dogs and other animals on the roads. Just like in Romania 20 years ago, cattle wanders onto the road and not always at pedestrian crossings. Not only cows but also pigs and other livestock. The second thing that strikes us is how incredibly green Georgia is. After all, if we look at the map, further east, at this altitude, all the countries are practically desert. That is because Georgia lies between mountains and between seas. The Caucasus to the north blocks masses of dry air. In the east, however, the climate is semi-arid. In the east, by the Black Sea, it is a very humid subtropical climate. We begin exploring Georgia by visiting a cave. First up, in the famous Prometheus cave. The cave was discovered in the early 1980s. Almost immediately, the Georgians decided to open it to tourists. The work was carried out in 2 stages, some in the 1980s and some in the early 1990s. Today, the tourist route through this cave is listed among the most interesting places in Georgia. Worth the hype? The cave has quite rich formations, though nothing unique on a global scale. The route itself is fairly long, well designed and one way. And to make things more interesting, a little like in the Czech Ponkava caves, you can leave the cave by boat, crossing an impounded underground lake. If there is one downside, it is the overly garish colored lighting in places, but tastes differ. I simply cannot stand it. The entire cave is 22 kilometers long, while the tourist route, including the boat ride, is 1,800 meters. The visit takes about an hour. After the cave, we go shopping. Of course, there are shops here just like anywhere in Europe. After all, Georgia is a European country. But we did not come here for cold cuts. What we are looking for is more likely to be found at the local market. We need it for the following day. Rubber gloves and Wellington boots. We end the day with a late lunch. A modest one, because dinner is still waiting for us at our accommodation. We booked our first stay at something like a farm guest house. At this kind of accommodation you can always add dinner and breakfast. And it's well worth it. It is definitely a better option than eating in restaurants. In fact, this first stay turned out to be the best of the entire trip. We set off in the morning. Gas pipes have been laid through all the villages, in a way that looks rather grotesque to us. Not necessarily on paved roads. Today we set off on a completely different adventure. It is time to make use of the off-road vehicles and the Wellington boots we bought the day before. Together with the guides we hired, we set off on a caving trip to Melouri Cave. Yes, tourists do go there, but they are very different from those visiting Prometheus Cave. Wearing full caving gear, meaning overalls and headlamps on our helmets, we descend into the cool darkness of the cave. And it is a sizable one, several kilometers long. The formations in this cave may not be quite as spectacular, but admiring them by the lights of our own headlamps is completely different from visiting a typical show cave. A little further on, the cave brings us to our knees and requires us to do some easy but genuine climbing. After squeezing through some narrower passages, we enter large breakdown chambers again. Time for a short break and a restorative meal. Truly in Georgian style. From this point on, the most interesting part of the trip awaits us. We enter a vast underground canyon. It stretches for about 1.5 kilometers, with a small stream on its floor at first, but gradually growing stronger. The contortions you have to perform to keep water from pouring into your butts, though there are different schools of thought here. It is quite warm inside the cave, so what if a little water gets in? Hours pass and the trip begins to drag a little. In the end, we do not reach the terminal soon. We turn back several hundred meters before it, so that we can stay within the allotted time of 5 or 6 hours. And there are plenty of attractions here. Underground showers, this curious mold grows on a piece of wood, and some truly enormous chambers. And indeed, after just under 6 hours, we are back on the surface. Now that was quite an underground adventure. This cave is simply made for exploits like these. The following day brings another of Georgia's major attractions. This time it is the viewing walkway in Okatse Canyon. A word of warning, the place where they sell the tickets is not the canyon. It is an hour's walk from there. There is also a car park right before the canyon, and you can drive there, but you cannot buy the tickets there. Once we have solved these logistical problems, we can finally set out along the viewing trail. Expectations are high. After all, this is one of Georgia's biggest attractions. We are early with no crowds. The views are certainly expansive, and anyone afraid of heights may struggle here. It soon turns out, however, that the canyon itself is fairly ordinary. In the Balkans, for example, there are plenty like it, and some are even more interesting. The walkways themselves are the real attraction here. Apparently, opinions about the viewing trail are mixed. We would describe it as moderately interesting. The walkways are a plus. The canyon itself is nothing special. But that is, of course, a very subjective opinion. After the visit, it is time to head into the higher reaches of the Caucasus. On the way, however, we turn into a side valley. Our caving guide had given us a tip. He recommended this place, which is very little known among tourists. This recreation center and restaurant by Green Lake are genuinely worth recommending. The surrounding mountain views are magnificent, and the ponds are teeming with enormous fish. They come in different colors, and, frankly, look extremely appetizing. Some of them are truly huge. Well, a few of the smaller ones will end up on our plates. The prices here are surprisingly reasonable, thanks to the place's limited popularity among foreign tourists. And this is a perfect opportunity to say a few words about the local food and cuisine. Georgian cuisine can be quite rich, full of wonderful meats, thick sauces, generously seasoned with fresh coriander, as well as aromatic vegetables and salads, and it enjoys an international reputation, perhaps slightly exaggerated, because although it is good, it is not exceptional. Whenever we choose traditional Khinkali in a good restaurant, freshly baked chapaturi, or other traditional Georgian dishes, wherever foreign tourists stay or simply pass through for a meal, without going overboard, you should expect to pay around 20 to 20 something euros per person. The standard of the restaurants is not bad, but at this price level, let us be honest, it is simply Western Europe. The days of cheap Georgia are over. Before ordering, it is worth asking whenever you can pay by card. In most places, you can. At this hipster-style restaurant, in a mountain ski resort, we ate very well. We also paid what was probably our highest bill, just under 100 euros for 4 people. At this place, in the non-touristy city of Gori, which was nearly as good and more traditional, dinner for us 4 cost us 20 euros. There simply are not many foreign visitors here. However, as I mentioned earlier, the best option for food is to order meals at local farm guest houses. You will not pay much less at local families' houses, but for a similar price you will get a huge selection of dishes and drinks, more than you could finish. Everything is fresh and genuinely interesting. Our favorites were the marinated aubergines and the chicken salad. Traditional Georgian feasts are called supra, and with a tamada or toastmaster presiding, they can continue for hours. A meal at a farm guest house is not quite the same thing, of course, but it offers a taste of it. Alright, let us return from this brief culinary detour to our journey into the mountains. The road continues up the valley, following the river. Its waters are ash grey because of what is known as glacial flour, the fine rock dust produced as a glacier grinds rock. We slowly climb higher. We are driving on a road that was built only last year. Previously, it was accessible only to off-road vehicles. Of course, Google Maps does not know this road exists. Google Maps in Georgia is not particularly reliable in general. This road is quite good. Our destinations are Ushguli and the town of Mestia. In the past, people usually reached them from the other side, along a road in poor condition that has become the stuff of legend. We are approaching the main ridge of Caucasus. The views are magnificent and traffic is spare. All that remains is to climb to the pass. It goes much faster than we might have expected. A few hairpin bends on the mountain road, and we reach Zagari Pass at an altitude of 2,1620 meters. After a steep descent, we reach the mountain village of Ushguli. This place is a true legend, but I have to admit that despite the easier access and the hastily built, it remains a magnificent place. In my opinion, most beautiful in Georgia. It lies at the foot of Mountain Shkhara, the country's highest mountain. It is part of the Besengi wall rising, 1.5 to 2 kilometers above the surrounding valleys. The local youngsters, like city kids on skateboards, play around here on horseback. They are master riders. For some reason, it is widely believed that the highest mountain in Georgia is Mount Kazbek, but that is simply not true. The settlement of Ushguli, or rather the 4 villages within it, is best known, however, for something else. Its complexes of fortified houses and towers. The towers, called Koshki in Georgian, together with the Machubi houses, were built mainly between the 9th and 13th centuries. Some of them are therefore around 1,000 years old. These buildings were designed first and foremost for defense. They protected the local population from invasions, but also apparently from bloody family vendettas. These towers, often connected to the houses here, usually stood 20 to 25 meters tall, had entrances high above the ground, and successive floors connected by ladders which could always be pulled up behind the occupants. For centuries, they remained unconquered. It was not until the 19th century that Russia conquered these lands. Meanwhile, it is slowly getting late. We still have almost an hour's drive ahead of us, so we set off. And with the sun setting behind the majestic twin summit of Ushba, we reach Mestia, where we will spend the night. Mestia, a small town of several thousand people, is the local tourist center. It has a distinct historic quarter, though the town itself is not especially beautiful. Its setting, however, is magnificent. All around it, even in summer, snow-covered peaks tower overhead. The town itself is packed with tourists. In the evening, finding a free table in any of its many restaurants and cafes is difficult. Driving through the narrow streets of the historic quarter requires a considerable skill. Fortunately, although Georgians are spirited, they can also be very understanding behind the wheel, and at the end of the day, there is not much traffic here. The following morning, we decide to take advantage of the local winter and summer infrastructure. Mestia has a small ski resort. A gondola lift takes visitors to the top of one of the modest hills, which rises to just over 1,200 meters. There are not many ski runs here. but the gondola makes it easy to reach a point from which we can admire wonderful panorama stretching in practically every direction. That twin summit behind us is the famous Mount Ushba. It is a truly impressive mountain, but the other massives around us rise well above 3000 meters. What stands out at an altitude of more than 2200 meters is the vegetation zone, which in our Tatra mountains would occur much lower. A sunny meadow like this is more reminiscent of the low Beskids, but what a view we have from here. In this direction, in all its glory, we can admire Mount Shkhara. Somewhere over there lies beautiful Ushguli. In fact, we are going there again today. This time we will not focus on the towers. Today we have a mountain hike planned. To avoid walking for kilometers on flat ground, we will make use of the fact that we have an off-road vehicle, although as you can see ordinary cars also manage quite well here. Many tourists choose horseback riding for transport. No wonder, here a horse is almost like a bicycle back home. Beautiful green meadows stretch all around us. Sometimes it is worth bending down and taking a closer look at them. We continue along a gravel road that gets steadily worse. Progress is slow. You could, of course, try to tear along here, but then your exhaust might fall off. Car rental companies in Georgia mainly offer off-road vehicles. No wonder, because many places can be reached by gravel roads. But although these roads look intimidating, the paved roads here can be even more dangerous. After all, it is in tarmac that sharp-edged potholes form, large enough to swallow an entire wheel. We continue the trip on foot. It is not particularly a strenuous hike. We have about 6 kilometers to cover each way, with 300 meters of ascent. Among the local plants we can spot Sosnowski hogweed. This dangerous plant, which terrorizes half of Europe, actually comes from here. No one here is afraid of it. That is the climate here. We are at around 2300 meters to 400 meters, yet we are surrounded by rich woodland. We slowly emerge above the scurb, the gigantic Shkhara towers above us, though in the meantime it has managed to hide partly in the clouds. And here we are at the glacier's terminus. This is the terminus of the Shkhara Glacier. A river flows from beneath the glacier. We spend some time here, watching careless tourists venture too close, then flee in panic from rocks falling from above. This is how a glacier lives and works. It is a shame the peaks have already disappeared behind the clouds, but there is no point complaining. We have had magnificent weather anyway. It is slowly time to head back. As always, the descent is easier. A dog accompanies us, probably a glacier dog. At the end of the drivable road, there is a small restaurant. You can get a perfectly decent meal there. We slowly make our way back, but the day is not over yet. Since hiring horses here is quite inexpensive, we send our representative out for a ride. It looks very photogenic, does it not? The following day we leave Svaneti. The famous road from Mestia to Zagari also seems to have been unfairly demonized. Yes, many sections have either collapsed or are being repaired, but let us not exaggerate. With so little traffic, we simply have to drive through carefully. This concludes the first of the 3 films. Are you curious to see what comes next? Join me!